So, so hello everybody. My name is Algo. I have with me my co-host Joe.
Hello.
He's currently eating spam, all possibly done.
I finished.
Good. So, welcome back to Definitely a Podcast. This is what we used to call the Algo and Joe talk show. It's then before that it was like the Algo cast or something. I mean, it's gone through a lot of name changes. So hopefully this is going to be one of the last official names. But as you might be able to hear from the music, and if you're watching this on YouTube, as you probably would have been able to tell by the title, considering I would have it in the title, today we are talking about Dark Souls 2. Now, a few weeks ago, so Joe and we've kind of done this sort of like alternating where we're each doing a game or games that the other person hasn't played before or doesn't know anything about. And so like Joe picked Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 4. I'm going with a bit of a theme here too. The first one I did was Dark Souls 1 and 3, and now I'm going to be talking about Dark Souls 2. But the topic for today is specifically something which might be seen by some as a little bit controversial, but when I say this title, or when you read this title as the YouTube video name, I don't mean that I truly feel this way. Like the title is why people hate Dark Souls 2, and I personally don't hate the game. However, there are a lot of people that really do, especially a lot of people that really love Dark Souls 1 and 3. Dark Souls 1 and 3 are very, they're well known and like fan favorite games. Especially Dark Souls 1, that one gets a lot of love. But Dark Souls 3 as well, like Dark Souls 3 is basically just more Dark Souls 1, whereas Dark Souls 2 kind of tried to do its own thing. And while I do appreciate when a game tries to do its own thing and when a sequel tries to actually make itself an interesting game, there are limits to how much just doing something new can be good as opposed to doing something good. I mean, there's like lots of examples of that in all sorts of different games, and it is interesting because it's really tough to find that medium ground. I am someone who plays a lot of World of Warcraft, and World of Warcraft back during like Burning Crusade, it did a lot of new things, but then when it went to Wrath, it was still like a lot of, obviously, new areas, new lore, new bosses, new dungeons, new raids, new everything, but like the way that the game worked wasn't entirely that much different. But because it was so well made, it ended up being really good and people really liked it. Versus where you think about like going into Warlords of Draenor, where they changed things up by giving people the garrisons so that they don't have to go out into the world and do anything. They can just sit in their homes all cooped up and get all the money they could ever need. Like that, along with just very, very little other content, made a lot of people really not like it. You can think of Destiny 2, where when that game first came out, they changed almost nothing from Destiny 1. In fact, they took a lot of stuff away, and the stuff that they had was basically just felt like an expansion of Destiny 1, and it was a big mess. It was a huge failure because people want something new. But again, something new doesn't necessarily always mean that it's going to be good, and with Dark Souls 2, you can see that for sure. So, just a little bit of background on Dark Souls 2 before I begin actually starting my tirade, not actually tirade, but before I start talking about it. There's a whole write-up on it. I can't explain it as well as the write-up actually does. I would suggest that you actually go look at this write-up, you read some information about it if you're interested. But there is a big long post that just talks about the development of this game, and it was a huge mess. When the game itself was first being made, it was so unbelievably different from the regular Dark Souls games that we know and love. Demon Souls and Dark Souls were like the only two examples that we had, but those two games were pretty similar. Dark Souls 2 was like completely different. It was its own thing. And we don't quite know how different or why it was so different, but we just know that it was very different. And so like a year before it was supposed to go live, like really short and before it was supposed to actually launch, they had to scrap the entire thing and start from scratch. And like they ended up getting like the original game director from Dark Souls 1 to help them fix it, because they were like, this isn't working, obviously. When you look at the amount of stuff that the game has, like how long it takes to complete it, it's kind of crazy that it was basically only done in a year with probably just a few, like a bunch of reused assets, but the game itself still had to be made from scratch. But on the same token, as you'll kind of tell throughout all of this this kind of discussion on it, it may have been like, it may be interesting that it was really able to be made in such a short time, but you'll realize that a lot of the stuff that was made was not very great. A lot of it was like a lot of patched together stuff, some very tedious bosses, some very tedious areas, a lot of not understanding what made Dark Souls 1 so good. And a lot of times where you can tell they just didn't really play test it much because they just kind of had to get it made and get it out of there. So, and that's not even to say anything really about bugs, because in all honesty, Dark Souls 2 isn't that buggy. It does have quite a few bugs, and some really game-breaking ones. There's I've been recently watching some Dark Souls 2 all bosses speedruns where people are able to do this weird thing they call parry walking, where they can just like, they do a parry and then they jump over the person, and then they like can clip through walls and climb down ladders past the point where they end. Like, really weird stuff. So anyway, so the development of the game was really, really weird. Then eventually they ended up releasing the Scholar of the First Sin edition, which came with all of the DLCs as well as a whole bunch of just overhauled world. So all of the enemies, like there were some new placements for some enemies, but like all the bosses were in the same spots. Like the gameplay itself was pretty much the same, but they moved almost every single item to a new place. They added in a few new like obstacles, and like a lot of just weird moving things for the sake of moving them. That didn't really make sense, and in a lot of cases almost actually made the game even less fun. So I personally have never played the original one. That the description of it being less fun comes from a lot of people who, like people like Lobos Jr. and people who are like very, very familiar with all of the Dark Souls games. So I would trust them that it is a less enjoyable placement. So I've never played the original, but quite frankly, I don't want to spend my money again to buy the original one, because then I'd also have to buy all the DLCs. And to be perfectly honest, I don't enjoy Dark Souls 2 that much. Again, I don't hate it, but it's just, I would rather play Dark Souls 1 or 3. And that's kind of something that I want to get across throughout all this, is that like Dark Souls 2 isn't a horrible game. It does, like the game itself works, it can be kind of fun to play, but in terms of games that I want to play, because it's a Dark Souls game, I would rather just play one of the other Dark Souls. The game itself fails at being a good Dark Souls, while it still succeeds at being a pretty decent game. So that's been a whole lot of opinion as to my feelings of the game. So let's get into some more information about like why would I be saying these things? Why do I get frustrated by the game, and why do people hate Dark Souls 2? So I'll start with the biggest thing for me, the biggest reason why I dislike the game, and why I think like the most important thing for me in most any game, which is bosses. So Dark Souls 2 is a very long game. I'm not talking about doing speedruns, because obviously speedruns are their own thing. But in terms of actually just playing the game, casually, or even just playing it as someone who's experienced with Dark Souls, the game itself can take like 15 to 20 hours to complete, whereas Dark Souls 3 can take like 8 to 10 hours, and Dark Souls 1 can take like 6 hours. Again, like as like someone that would be like experienced but not a speedrunner, obviously if you're not experienced, then Dark Souls 2 can take even longer. I think my first playthrough was like 30 hours. And that's 30 hours of gameplay. I don't even know if, because that's like going off of the in-game timer. I don't know if that even counts things like loading zones and all that. But the game has a lot of bosses. I don't remember the exact amount. Actually, let me just real quick Google it up. Does Dark Souls 2 have? It has 32 bosses. Feels like a whole lot
You
more.
missed a few in your list there.
Oh yeah,
You're not gonna talk about every boss in the game.
every single, all 32 of them. Yeah, there's a lot of bosses in this game. Some of them don't even feel like bosses. For example, Magus and Congregation. So, I'll give a brief overview of any of the bosses when I talk about them, but I'm not going to explain them as in depth as I did with my other Dark Souls 2 episode, because there are a lot of bosses that I want to get through. But like, Magus and Congregation is literally just a bunch of normal enemies in a room with a boss health bar. Like, genuinely, there's not a boss in the room. But it plays boss music and has a boss health bar. It's like, why?
Are these enemies you can find in other places? They're just like, okay, we're gonna put a bunch of them.
Yeah, it's all of the enemies except for one of them you can find in other areas. The one enemy that you can't find in another area, you can find in Dark Souls 1 as a normal enemy. They literally took just a normal Dark Souls 1 enemy and placed him in the middle there as the Magus, and then the Congregation are just a bunch of enemies that you can just find while walking throughout the world. It's pretty dumb. Funny enough, I guess really Dark Souls 3 kind of has a similar thing with the they also have a boss where I don't know, I can't remember the name of the boss right now because it's one of my favorite bosses, but the difference between these bosses and that one is that one is like a swarm of enemies, whereas this one is like you just walk into a room and it's just normal enemies doing their own thing. And like the enemies in the Dark Souls 3 boss, they respawn, and then there becomes like halfway through there comes an actual boss that you fight. So it's a little different, but it is pretty similar.
I can just imagine walking in and be like, oh shoot, this is so difficult. Okay, they're all dead. I guess I won.
Yeah, pretty much. If you go in with like a claymore or something and you just like swing around like 3 times, it's like, oh, okay, they're all dead now, because they are like all clumped right in the center of the room. And so if you just go in there and attack them fast, it's like, oh, the fight's done. So not very good. Kind of in the same vein, we can talk about grave robbers. So the grave robbers, sometimes called Gank Squad, is literally just like 3 humanoid enemies. It's essentially 3 players. You fight Havel and 2 other people. Anyone who's unfamiliar or who knows who Havel is, he was from Dark Souls 1. He's the guy with tons of armor and the big like dragon tooth, like, you know, gigantic like big black horn like weapon that he just kind of bonks around. He has like the huge shield and everything. He's just super tanky. They decide to make him one of the 3 bosses in this, and it literally is just you walk into the room and there's just 3 humanoid enemies and you're just kind of by yourself. And they, you know, one of them shoots you with arrows while the other one like charges you, and the other one kind of tanks the hits and everything, and it's like really obnoxious, really unfun. Not only is it like really annoying because these 3 enemies are like, you're never getting a moment to attack, so most of the time while you're fighting them, you're just running around in circles. The fight can take like 15 minutes on a good build, because if you like try and attack, you're just gonna get wombo comboed and killed. But like, they're just sitting there like roll spamming around. Like, if you've ever, I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a famous video of a person who went as Solaire from Dark Souls 1 to a cosplay convention, and he went with his sword, and he would like aim his sword at other cosplayers that had swords of some variety, and they would like put their weapon out like they were about to fight, and then he would just start rolling around on the floor around them. That's basically what grave robbers is. just rolling, a roll fiesta. There's also bosses that are repeated, which is very, very annoying. That happened in Dark Souls 1, and so of course it has to happen in this game twice. You have the Smelter Demon, which happens once. It's a good boss, except then you fight it again with almost no change, other than he has slightly different resistances in a DLC later. And then the pursuers, you fight the pursuer as a boss, and then you fight him like 10 times just throughout the game as a normal enemy. He just sometimes comes in and attacks you for no reason.
Yo, what's up?
yeah, pretty much. You're just walking, minding your business, and then he pops up. He's like, hey, how's it going? And he gives you like one really crappy item, but Then if you leave the area, he just disappears and doesn't come back until you reload the area, which is great. You have the Dragon Rider, who coincidentally that's the music that's playing right now, who you fight the Dragon Rider, and then later on in the game you fight 2 Dragon Riders at the same time. And yeah, you have the Old Giant, who you fight later on, except now he has a sword, but he still fights as slowly as he did before, but now he has a sword. You have Ava, who you later fight 2 of as Lud and Zalin in the famously known, famously named Horse Relations Valley. I won't say what it actually is called because it has a very famous name in the Dark Souls community. But the name is one of those things I heard people talking about it before I played the game, and I was like, that's such a weird name for a place. And then you play it, and it is very, very, very fitting. So we'll talk about that zone later. You have the Royal Rat Vanguard, which is literally just a bunch of normal rat enemies, and you just keep fighting them until the boss rat shows up. And the boss rat is also just a normal rat enemy, except he's got a mohawk. And yeah, and once you kill the mohawk rat, that they all just leave. You've got the Guardian Dragon, which is just a normal like wyvern dragon enemy that you can fight like a bunch of throughout the game, except this one is even more obnoxious because he spends like 90% of the fight just flying around the room unable to be hit. So
you don't bother to learn that shout that I don't even remember what it's called.
Yeah, with Dragon Rend, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've also got a lot of bosses that are just reuses of Dark Souls 1 bosses. The Twin Gargoyles becomes the 6 Gargoyles. Twin Gargoyles from Dark Souls 1 is now 6 Gargoyles in Dark Souls 2. You have the Old Dragon Slayer, which is just a scaled down version of Phase 2 Orenstein from Dark Souls 1. You have the Royal Rat Authority, which is more rats, and then you fight the Sif Rat, which is just it's just a larger rat that has the same moveset as Sif from Dark Souls 1. You have the Skeleton Lords, which is like a kind of neat fight, except it's basically just you fight 3 tall skeletons and then you fight just like 100 small skeletons. But then you also have some of the more like the bosses that you fight only one time that are also really bad. The Covetous Demon, which is this really fat demon that like attacks super slowly and does barely any damage and just kind of flops around, and basically is, I would venture to say, is the easiest boss in like all of the Dark Souls series, because you literally just walk in and you just go to his side and you keep attacking, and then you go to his side and you keep attacking, and he can't do anything to you. You also have the Ancient Dragon, which is a dragon boss the only reason why he's difficult is because all of his attacks like basically one shot, and he has more health than any other boss in the game. But really, there are 2 ways to fight him. One way is you go up and you attack him, and then when he flies up into the air to breathe fire, then you run away and then you run back in after he's done. Or you can just attack his toes. That's one of the more famous strategies. You can attack his back left foot, like running in between the toes, and just keep attacking there, and he like can't hurt you at all. It's like, so the fight itself takes 5 minutes because he's just got so much health, but he's not doing anything. You're just attacking his toes. So. And there are other like not great bosses. There are some good bosses we'll talk about later, but there's a lot of really not great bosses. My personal worst one is the Grave Robbers. Also because the Grave Robbers has a horrible run to area. That's what we'll talk about in a little bit. But Lud and Zalin is also a really bad one. That's the double cats. Especially because it's literally just one cat, but now there's 2 of them. But that's whatever.
Listening to this already, like, I know they were like, we only have a year until we're supposed to release this game. And so they probably sat down and had a like 30-minute board meeting being like, okay, people like bosses, let's just make a crap ton of bosses.
Yes.
And they probably did the entire like idea, move set, everything in like half an hour, and they're like, okay guys, go.
Yeah, they were like they brought in like their boss design team. They came in with like a gigantic plate just like stacked as tall as it could be with just cocaine, and they're like, all right, everyone get a sniff and let's go. We got 32 bosses to knock out in an afternoon. Let's go. They just went to it as fast as they could. And it is like that is a very good point though. Like it's 32 bosses because I'm sure that's what it was they were like, you know, hey, people really like bosses in Dark Souls, so let's make a bunch more bosses. But as they were working through them, they were like, boy, making bosses is hard. What if we just reuse the same boss, or what if we just make it that you fight a second one or whatever, you know? So you think about like all the bosses that are reused in general. The game itself has like 20 some, like a low 20s in terms of bosses, which is about as much as Dark Souls 3 has, except Dark Souls 3 has a lot of original bosses. So granted, Dark Souls 3 has some not great bosses. Some of them are pretty annoying, but they are still like all original. So
it's like, oh, that one was hard to make, but it was pretty good. Control C, Control V.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. Well, and that's the thing, is that like Smelter Demon, the boss that you fight 2 times in the game with almost no difference, it is a good boss. Smelter Demon is one of the best bosses in the game, but it's not as fun when you have to fight, you know, 2 of them. There is also the music that's playing right now is the Smelter Demon fight, but there is a boss that is a cool boss. I really like it, but it is also very lazy. It's the Ruined Sentinels, because it's literally just 3 of the exact same enemy in a room, and you just fight one and then you wait for the next one to walk in, and then you fight that one, and then you wait for the next one to walk in and you fight that one. The only difficulty comes is like if your damage is too low, then you can end up having the second one show up before you're done with the first one, or the third one before you're done with the second. But still, it is pretty lazy because there's no difference between any of the 3 of them. It's just 3 of the exact same enemies. So, you know, Control C, Control V, pretty much. So one of the other big problems I have with this game is the zones. So what I mean by zones is like you know, you load into the game and you have, oh, I want to get to this boss. You have to run through the zone in order to get to the boss. So, you know, for example, Haze Tower of Flame, which is the first annoying zone I'm going to talk about. That one, it has Dragon Rider at the end of like the first part, and also the old Dragon Slayer at the end of the other half of it. The zone itself that you have to walk through in order to get to those bosses is the zone that I'm talking about, the Haze Tower of Flame. So starting it off with annoying zones, and I will also say, I don't think there's a single zone in Dark Souls 2 that I actually enjoy going through, other than maybe the Sunken King DLC, just because it feels like a Legend of Zelda like dungeon temple thing. But other than that, I have maybe parts of Drangleic Castle, but not most of it. So the Haze Tower of Flame is like this very, very long area where if you can do like this really weird cheese on the Dragon Rider fight. That it's one of those fights you can defeat it in like 5 seconds on any build. Because he just walks towards you, and then if you run forward at the right time, he does like a thrusting attack where he'll just thrust himself off the ledge and just die instantly. And it's always very funny too if you do that, because like the music just cuts off the second he dies, so you got like this build-up music like duh, 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 and then it just stops. It's like, oh, okay, he's dead. So, oh yeah, and here's the music playing right now. This is literally just Dark Souls 1 Belfry Gargoyles, twin gargoyles, but they literally just use the same song and the same enemies and the same moveset in the boss fight, except now there's 6 of them. So anyways,
Times is fun.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So, but yeah, so Haze Tower of Flame, it's a very long area. If you don't know beforehand that you can cheese the boss, then you might end up opening up some stuff that makes, like, it makes fighting the boss itself actually easier because it makes the arena wider, but it also removes the ability for him to fall off the arena. So most people will avoid those, but if you don't know about it ahead of time, then you just kind of screwed yourself. It's also got these very annoying, I think they're called Haze Knights. I don't remember for sure, but they have like this really wonky moveset that doesn't make much sense. They kind of like flop around, and then like within a frame, all of a sudden they're swinging at you. And so it's like, how does one dodge that? I don't know. But they also swarm you. Like anytime there's one, there's usually like two or three. And especially when you need to go to Old Dragon Slayer, you need to fight just this one random wyvern that's guarding a switch that you literally have to kill the wyvern in order to get to it. But in order to get to the wyvern, you have to get through like 10 or 12 different Haze Knights, or the tall, like really tall guys that have giant shields. And because durability is a real concern and a real issue, you can't really fight them and still actually have your weapon be not broken by the time you reach the boss. And so you have to run through them. But if you run through them, then you end up getting them all chasing you by the time you end up getting to the wyvern. And then the wyvern doesn't do any damage to them, and they don't attack the wyvern. And so you're just kind of circling this wyvern who's like stomping on you and breathing fire at you, while you're also getting chased by a bunch of these knights. And if you don't run across before the wyvern breathes his fire breath, you literally cannot cross the bridge. It's actually genuinely impossible to cross the bridge without just restarting from the bonfire, because he just spam breathes fire and you can't get past it. It's like, I don't know who designed that, but that's a Scholar of the First Sin thing. The original game actually didn't have that, but when they remade and re-added a bunch of stuff in Scholar of the First Sin, they were like, you know what? People would really enjoy not being able to play the game, so let's do this.
This is much better.
Yes, the game has been fixed.
So you can't kill the wyvern?
You can. So you can kill him, but he's got a lot of health, and in order to reach him, you have to get through all of these other enemies. And if you try and just run past the enemies, then they're all going to be chasing you all the way through to this wyvern, and then you're not going to be able to attack him, because anytime you try and attack him, you're going to get attacked by all of the other knights and everything. So it really, like, the only way to make it through here is either get lucky or come back here at a high enough level to be able to like kill everything or kill the wyvern really fast, or 3, pack a bunch of weapons and just allow a lot of them to break. So
and what do you think the developers intended in terms of?
It's a good question. I wouldn't be surprised if their intended strat really was just pack a bunch of weapons. But I think it was one of those cases where it was an idea that sounded really great on paper, but didn't really work all the way through. The other option is the developers may genuinely have intended for you to come back here at a high level. The problem is the boss that you fight is very easily doable at base level, like at when you start the game, you can fight the boss, and it's because the boss itself does very low damage and has very low health. Not to mention, it's literally just Ornstein, which we have already, most people that played Dark Souls 2 have already played Dark Souls 1. And so they're already used to fighting Ornstein from Dark Souls 1. And so the boss fight itself is like ridiculously easy. The run up to it is way harder. But I do think the developer intentions are either pack a bunch of weapons or just go in there while you're super high level. Because that would make the wyvern reasonable to fight, and that would make all the other enemies reasonable to fight without your weapon breaking. It would just make the boss fight about as easy as any of the normal enemies that you're fighting. So, and the frustrating thing is that the boss there drops the best ring in the game for any thrust weapons. It makes your thrust weapons sometimes deal like, I think 50% more damage. It's like it makes them deal more damage on counterattacks, which is basically if the enemy is attacking at all while you're attacking, you do a counterattack. And so the thing is, enemies like don't stop attacking in this game, so you're like almost always dealing just 50% more damage. So like, so yeah, the zone itself is not the worst. Out of all of these bad zones, it's the best one, but it is still obnoxious to go through, especially to the old Dragon Slayer. No Man's Wharf is another example. It's this very long zone that it's like you constantly just are climbing up and then having to go back and heal up and get more, having to get more Estus flasks because you basically you got through like a tenth of the area, you opened up a shortcut, but because there's like 50 enemies that are just shooting arrows at you constantly, you took all of this little damage, and there's all these packs of like 5 dogs and like 12 enemies that just like anytime there's an enemy in this game, there's like 10 more around the corner, and so it's so difficult to make it through without taking damage. And so you end up having to go back and get more Estus, and then you continue from the checkpoint and you make it to the second tenth of the zone, and you open up the checkpoint, and then your health is very low and you're out of Estus, so you have to go back. And so the zone just takes so long to get through. Granted, obviously, if you really know what you're doing, if you're really good at the area, you can just run through almost everything. There are a lot of times where there are enemies just literally blocking a door, so you can't get past unless you kill them. But one of the other problems is that by the time you get to No Man's Wharf, you're gonna not have leveled up very much, so you don't have a whole lot of ADP, which is something we'll talk about later, which gives you less iframes, which means whenever you're dodging, you are very likely to get hit by anything and everything the game has to offer. So, very, very annoying stuff to have to go through No Man's Wharf. And you don't even have to go through the area because you can just skip it by defeating the pursuer, which you like are supposed to defeat. So you can skip the area, but it does have a boss at the end of it. So if you're like me, who wants to do every boss whenever you play each game, you have to go through this area. And like, but it's like it's such an unnecessary area. Also required if you're doing a magic playthrough, because there's a guy that gives you all your magic stuff. So obnoxious.
Or listen to this. Do it later.
Yeah, that's also the option, is just come back a lot later when you're way over geared, so that way you don't have to constantly going back. That's probably what I should be doing whenever I play the game from now on, is just come back later, so I'll save myself the annoyance. One other thing to keep in mind, all of these zones, like a lot of these zones do have they have Estus shards, so you kind of like are supposed to go through them in order to get your Estus shards to get more Estus flasks. But this game also has life gems, which are just Estus flasks, but slightly slower, except that you can have 99 life gems. So, and then there's also the stronger life gems that heal for more over the same duration. So like, you don't really need Estus flasks as much. They're kind of more of like an emergency thing, but still, the completionist in me gets annoyed playing Dark Souls 2, and especially areas like No Man's Wharf. But that's partially on the game, but that's also a lot on me at being a completionist. So, Shaded Woods, very annoying area. I hate going through Shaded Woods because all of the enemies are ghost enemies, except for a few enemies, so you can't actually target onto them, so you just have to swing in their direction. And if you're using a thrust weapon, which is like the most powerful weapon in the game, it's almost impossible to hit them because they're constantly dodging around. So they really suck. They're really annoying to fight, but you know, it's like whatever. They actually, it is kind of cool. You do end up actually being able to see them and target them if you do the Ivory King DLC. But before then, they're just really obnoxious enemies that are just constantly in the way that you can't fight normally or easily. Not to mention, also Shaded Woods has like, I think 6 or 7 Fragrant Branch of Yore enemies, which means you need to use the Fragrant Branch of Yore, of which there are a limited amount throughout a playthrough, in order to unfreeze these guys, in order to get past whatever they're blocking, whether it's an item, whether it's some extra path, whether, you know, whatever it is. Sometimes there literally is nothing that they're blocking. And the most annoying thing about it, yeah, it's very dumb. There's a total of 17 enemies frozen in the entire game. Again, like 7 of them are in the Shaded Woods for some reason, but there's also only 17 Fragrant Branches of Yore in the entire game. And every time I get to this part of the game, especially Shaded Woods, I end up needing to look up a guide to see what I should be using my Fragrant Branches of Yore on. And this is coming from someone who's played through the game like 10 times now. I still don't know, because it's just so like random and worthless. But like, there are some things that you like, in order to get boss weapon soul transposition, you need to unfreeze a certain enemy. In order to get the best caster gear in the game, you need to unfreeze this other guy, but in order to unfreeze him, you need to unfreeze someone else. But you know, where do you get all the fragrant branches to unfreeze all these guys? In order to get shaded woods in general, you have to unfreeze this one other person. It's, you know, it's just so needless.
And to get to this useless corner, you also need to...
Yes, yeah. In order to get to this useless corner, which holds a chest that has like 2 life gems, you need to unfreeze this other guy, and then, yeah, woo.
When you were saying that for a second, I was like, don't tell me there's less items than there are people to unfreeze.
Yeah, it's pretty obnoxious. I believe there's exactly how many, or there's exactly the amount of people that you need to of fragrant branches to unfreeze them as there are people that are frozen. But like, I don't know, some of them are like so well hidden. Some of them are like, you can accidentally make it impossible to get based off of progression. So in that case, then you're kind of just screwed. But you know, whatever, I guess. Just yeah, it's fragrant branches of yore are a very stupid thing. And in the original game, there was only 5 enemies that were frozen and 5 fragrant branches. And then Skull of the First Sin came out, and they were like, you know what people really liked doing was getting these worthless branches and unfreezing people. Yeah. They wanted to turn the game into something like Fortnite, where when you kill an enemy in Fortnite, they drop like 80 just random items, most of which are useless. So they were like, hey, that game in the future will do really well, so let's go ahead and make 18 billion useless items in our game. Just bloat it with a bunch of extra stuff. That's great. People like bloat. The Gutter and the Black Gulch, anyone that's played the game, I don't need to explain why, but anyone that hasn't played the game, obviously I should explain. An area called the Gutter and an area called Black Gulch, you can imagine are probably not very pleasant places to be at, just by the name. But the Gutter and the Black Gulch are literally just poison fiestas. So the Gutter is like a pitch black area where you need a guide in order to figure out where to go, because it is it's a pitch black maze. It's like our old Minecraft adventure map mazes, except like there's also enemies that break your armor. There's enemies that just knock you off the platforms into your death. There's like just poison everywhere. Like you'll just be walking along and all of a sudden a statue will just shoot poison at you, hit you in the head. You'll be sitting there staggered for like 5 seconds, and then it'll shoot you again and get you poisoned. And if you don't die from the poison, you'll end up dying from getting knocked off because the poison statue kept knocking you back. Like the whole area.
You turn the corner and the cosmonaut from Moon is standing there.
Yeah, I would expect the cosmonaut to be there and just take you back to the start of the zone, as well as removing your weapon. Like that would just only be fitting for the zone. It's so obnoxious. And then when you finally get through this very annoying area, you land at the bottom with like, I think 6 guys that they'll run at you and blow up. It doesn't kill them when they blow up, but it will kill you. And so you have to like run away from them and just like take little hits and then run for your life before they blow up again. Then there's like 50 pots in the way, all of which, as soon as you attack them, they release this goo that damages all of your currently equipped gear. So if you try to roll through them, or if you attack them to break them while in close range, they will literally just break your weapon. So you have to get like a bunch of throwing knives and just sit from afar and just yeah.
That is so fun.
Yes, it's great. And then the fun doesn't stop there, because you get into the Black Gulch, which is, at least you can kind of see where you're going, but it's literally every single inch just has a poison statue pointing at it. Like literally everywhere you're going, as you're walking through, you're just hearing from all of the different poison statues just shooting at you. Not to mention, there's also these worms that just poke out of the wall and block your path while the poison statues are shooting at you. There are these hand enemies that come out of oil and will like grab onto you and hold you in place and like steal. I think they even steal your souls. I don't remember for sure because I like very rarely actually get grabbed by them. There's like a side area that is almost impossible to see, but is required in order to get to one of the DLCs, in order to kill one of the main bosses, and in order to get to the Dark Lurker boss. But it's like impossible to see this side area unless you just take a random leap of faith. There's a bonfire close to the boss that you have to use one of those fragrant branches of yore in order to unfreeze a guy by, and if you don't have one, well, screw you, you're not getting to that checkpoint. There's an enemy that invades every single time. The bonfire itself is surrounded by like the boss fog, in order to get to the boss fight, is surrounded by like 4 poison statues that will shoot you every inch of the way, so you have to get to a very specific path in order to get through. It's awful. It's such a terrible game, but I mean, Freudian slip there, sorry. It's such a terrible area. Whoops. But very obnoxious. And then you get to the boss, and the boss is like one of the easiest bosses in the game. He is so easy to fight, so easy in fact, and very easily accessible that a lot of speed runs for the game, at least in the past, I don't know if they still do, but in the past they used to use this thing called Bonfire Aesthetic on the bonfire before, which Bonfire Aesthetic will essentially respawn everything that is associated with that bonfire, which is basically anything past that bonfire until the next bonfire, including bosses at the next new game cycle. So like it'll set it to like new game plus, and so it makes the boss itself more difficult, but it also makes the boss give more souls, and it does respawn the boss. So because it was such an easy boss and very easily accessible, that just basically ended up becoming the sort of strategy is just use 3 bonfire aesthetics and just keep respawning the boss and get like 1 billion souls, and then you can level up a bunch, and that unlocks a thing later on. If you get a certain amount of souls, you can like skip past some progression. So like I like the bonfire aesthetic system. That's like one of the few things about this game I do really like. So we'll be talking about that a little bit later as well. But there's other annoying areas in the game, including Dragon Airy, which is like unnecessary. But if you do go through the area, it's great for getting a whole bunch of crafting materials. But if you go through the area, there's a bunch of those explodey boys that, you know, run along and explode, except now they also destroy your durability whenever they explode on you. And they explode, like when they see you, if they're within a certain range of you, they will dive and explode in a span of about 0.3 seconds. So unless you are rolling at that moment, you will get hit. And when they land on you, it literally does break your weapon and your rings. Like, unless you have really high durability stuff, it will just break them instantly.
You know, I just had a thought, and I was like, what if they were worried while they had a year left to make the game, that what if people realize we haven't put enough content in, so let's just try to make them rage quit before they get to the end of the game.
Yeah, it's Dark Souls 2 really does feel like one of those games where the developers specifically want you to not play the game, and it does that would add a lot of logic and reasoning as to why, where they were like, crap, this game is not up to our standards, maybe we can just make people rage quit, and then they won't see what we've done. They won't see the mess that we've made. There's also something I had forgotten to write down, but something else that I remembered. And this is present in all areas, but the Forest of the Fallen Giants, one of the first zones in the game, is like the area I remember it the most. There are so many places in this game where they specifically put things in an area just to be obnoxious. And I don't mean that as in a, like, you know, oh, I dislike why they put this here. No, like, you can tell that this game itself this is kind of a broad topic that I kind of want to get across with this game. This game feels like it was made by someone who played Dark Souls 1 and didn't understand what made Dark Souls 1 good. They thought it was just because the game itself was very difficult, and because it has a lot of really tough areas and everything, and because you die a lot. And so they're like, okay, let's force the player to die a bunch on their first playthrough. And so they have areas where there are 2 shield guys who you can't break their shield. You just need to wait until like you get a lucky shot, that are blocking a doorway, and they like don't move. They also made it that when you're going into a fog gate, for the first like 3 seconds, you can still be attacked, and that will break you out of going into the fog gate. And so they put these 2 guys by a fog gate that you need to get through, and so you have to kill them in order to get through. But they also are like really difficult to attack, and like while you're attacking their shields, while they're blocking, they can just start attacking you instead and just sit there, both of them staggering you. There are like so many areas in the game where you walk around a corner and there's just an enemy sitting there that just stabs at you while you're walking around the corner. Literally not a possible way to see it unless you knew the enemy was there ahead of time, which would only happen from having played the game already before. So like, just like, why does that exist? Why do those enemies have to be there? So that happens a lot in Forest of the Fallen Giants, but it also happens just throughout the whole game. The Shrine of Amana is possibly the worst area in all of the base game. The DLCs have much worse areas, but Shrine of Amana is terrible because you have it's a whole zone that is basically covered by water, and so you can barely see the ground, but there is certain areas where there is ground, and most of the area there is not ground, so you have to follow a specific path, most of which is underwater. There's also a lot of enemies that attack really fast with really long range, and there's also just a bunch of magic casters just placed haphazardly throughout the zone that can shoot you from across the entire zone. They can just snipe you. And so while you're going through the zone, you're constantly hearing this sound of magic just flying by, just flying by. You're constantly having to roll because otherwise you're going to get hit by all these things. And you're like, it feels like it feels like they played Call of Duty 3. And there was like, oh, there's this level where everyone's, you're getting off. I don't know if it's supposed to be Normandy. I don't remember for sure because it's been a long while since I played this game. But you're like at Normandy and you're like getting off of the ship and you're like hiding behind cover as there's just bullet fire just flying along. That's what walking through the Shrine of Amana feels like. It's like you're on the beaches of Normandy. It's a chaotic mess. But that's not even, oh, and then there's also this area where there's this giant beetle guy that sits there. He has like 1 billion health, so you can't kill him in one go before he starts spewing out his durability loss gas, because that was a fun mechanic. Every time they've used that in the game, let's do it more. So what he just starts spewing out this gas that just damages your weapons. The problem is, by the time that gas dissipates, he starts shooting out more gas. So he's in a permanent state of shooting out this durability loss gas. So how do you kill him? Literally the only way I've ever been able to figure out how to kill him without breaking your weapons is by using ranged weapons, which most builds can't do. So what are you supposed to do about this enemy? And that's one of those areas where I think about, thinking about again, the question you had asked earlier. What was the developer going for here? What was the reasoning? What do I think might have been the reason that the developer put this here? Genuinely, I don't know. No matter how many times I think about it, I can't figure it out.
I mean, we keep talking about it, like, I feel like, I mean, I don't know how much of the development team was from the original game, but it seems like the people who made the second game understood the first game as, oh, it was a rage game. Yeah,
it feels it's like the developers of like Cat Mario or the Impossible Game or the Impossible Quiz, that those were the people that they hired for this, and they were like, oh yeah, rage game, let's make a game that makes people just angry, and they'll post videos of themselves online of them getting all angry and rage. I dislike this mechanic, grr. And not, hey, let's make a game that people want to play. Because you would think making a game that people want to play should be first and foremost when you're designing a game. But that, yeah, it definitely, it's exactly what you said. It feels like this was made by people who understood Dark Souls 1 as a rage game and not as a, like, patience and, like, hard work payoff game. So, despite all this, despite all these areas, those are not even the worst. The worst areas come from each of the 3 DLCs. They all have a terrible area. Now, the Ivory King DLC is my least favorite DLC. It has a really great boss, the Burnt Ivory King boss, but Ava is a lukewarm boss, and Lud and Zalan are the terrible bosses. But like the Sunken King and the Iron King DLC have kind of obnoxious areas to go through, but not terrible. They're like very puzzle-like, and they're kind of neat with some very annoying areas, but decent. Ivory King, I think one of the reasons why I hate the DLC so much is because you go through, you backtrack like 3 times in order to actually unlock like the stuff required to defeat the Ivory King boss. But also every single enemy in that DLC is highly resistant to magic. So if you're doing a magic playthrough, just don't play the Ivory King DLC and you will save yourself a lot of annoyance. I like on my I've done a few full playthroughs, but I've done only one full magic playthrough. And the Ivory King DLC, literally, it was the last thing that I did in the game as the magic playthrough was Ivory King, and it made me so angry that I literally didn't play Dark Souls 2 for a year afterwards, because I was just like, this is just not fun. Like, no developer could design something like this and think, hey, this is enjoyable. Let's make magic users like just not be able to play the game. Like, that must have been what their thoughts were. I don't know. But again, those aren't even the terrible parts. The terrible parts are the 3 extra bosses in all 3 of the DLCs. So in order to get to the grave robbers in the Sunken King DLC, you have to go through I don't even remember what the area is called, but it's this area that is very reminiscent of the Gutter and Black Gulch, where it's just constant statues shooting at you, except these statues don't shoot poison at you, they shoot petrify at you. And petrify, if you get too high petrify, you just are instantly killed, and instead of poison, where it just does damage to you. Not only that, there's also walking statues, which you can't kill, which is walking statues that shoot like in 8 directions around them. There's also a bunch of other enemies that will poison you, and it's also a maze, and there's a bunch of paths that are like completely blocked by these statues, so you need to like lure them out and then go through. And then you get to the awful grave robbers boss, which is also super annoying and very easy to die on. So you have a terrible run back just to get to the worst boss in the game. Then the second DLC has a similar area, except it's instead of petrify statues, it's just like 40 enemies in a room. You get into this area and there's like 2 enemies, one of them shooting magic at you, one of them shooting arrows at you. There's also this giant enemy that's got these crazy hitboxes that has like a backswing that'll damage behind him with like lingering fire. And then like a bunch of these areas, and then a fog gate that is right next to one of the giant enemies, so you basically can't get through unless you kill the giant enemy, which means suffering through getting shot with arrows forever and ever. And then that leads to the second Smelter Demon, which is at least a decent fight. It's just a repeat. But you also have the second DLC also has the run up to one of the best bosses in the game, which is a shame because it's got the worst run up to a boss other than the Lud and Zalan one, with Bewitched Knight Alon, who you have to run through. I think it's a total of 30 Alon Knights, which all like run faster than you do and have longer range than you can run out of, so you basically have to be spam rolling. Also some ranged ones, also these weird lizards that just spew fireballs at you, and like all this just extra stuff. Not to mention you're also in it puts you in a dream sequence, so you have a total of like 10 minutes to even make it through in the first place before it just kicks you out. And so you can't sit and fight them, you have to just sprint through. It's like, I don't know what they were expecting you to do. It's because you also can't summon in this area unless you're playing online. You can't summon in this area, so you can't even count on like, oh, maybe they wanted you to have other summons and do whatever. No, literally, I don't know what you're supposed to do. I that was where my most recent playthrough of Dark Souls 2 ended up quitting, was on Bewitched Night Alon, because I literally couldn't get to the fight because I kept getting killed by all these stupid Alon knights. And anyone that plays Dark Souls 2 that actually has played it, multiple times, will agree that yes, the run back to Bewitched Night Alon is one of the worst run backs in all of Dark Souls. It is bonkers to me that exists. Because again, it's such a cool boss, and it's locked behind the worst run back other than the Frigid Outskirts one. Like, the whole run back doesn't need to exist. Now, granted, there is a stupid mechanic in this game where if you kill an enemy, I think like 10 or 15 times, it doesn't respawn anymore until the next new game cycle, which is either a Bonfire Aesthetic or just going to the new game cycle. So, like, if you just take, 15 deaths basically and just kill everything, then you can make it through the run back without having to fight all of them. But like,
yes, that's their goal there.
Yes, yeah, like if that was the goal for them, was to make it that you have to go through the area 15 times before you can fight a cool boss, then bravo, you broke me. But then we get to the very famous, the beloved Horse Relations Valley. Now, again, there is a name for this zone that I will not say because it's a much more extreme name. But I like to call it Horse Relations Valley because that still maintains some of the original name as well. It is very funny. And when I had first heard the name Horse Relations Valley, I thought, what a weird name for a zone. I had literally no idea what to expect with a name like that. I was very confused. But then you get into the area. Horse Relations Valley is this massive area. The area itself is called Frigid Outskirts, by the way. I'm going to call it that from now on because it's a little silly calling it Horse Relations Valley. But Frigid Outskirts is this massive area, bigger than any other area that exists in the zone. This whole area is just a frozen wasteland with, I think, 2 or 3 separate buildings just placed around the area. The area itself is completely covered in a heavy snowstorm, which limits your sight more than just about 2 or 3 feet. Every 40 seconds or so, you get maybe 10 to 15 seconds of being able to see across the whole zone because the snow goes away, and then it goes away again, or then it continues again. Then the snow continues, and you get, you can't see anything. You need to make it all the way to this very small bridge way at the other end of the zone, which you can then cross, which takes you into Luddenszalen. No bonfire, by the way. There's no bonfire in this entire zone. If you could just walk through the zone straight to Luddenszalen without anything else, just walk straight to there, it's, I think, 3 minutes of walking. Just 3 minutes of nothing, just walking. The problem is, of course, it's not just a straight shot because you have some of these buildings and you have some ledges here and there where you can fall off. But not only that, there's also these horse enemies, these lightning horse enemies that will just come out of the mist out of nowhere and charge at you. They have the worst hitboxes. They can hit you. They have very lingering hitboxes. They can hit you for a crazy high amount of damage. They don't stop attacking. They have nearly infinite stamina, and they just keep doing charge attacks on you. Sometimes they do just big lightning explosion attacks around them, which you can't dodge. You just have to run away from. And sometimes more than one will spawn at a time. So when you got 2 of them attacking you with unending stamina, it's almost impossible to get a counterattack in. They charge way faster than you do, so you can't really run away from them. And they just will spawn every 20 to 30 seconds at a random interval. They don't really give you much anything either, and they will just sometimes pop up. I don't even know if it's possible to get them to stop spawning, like it is with most other enemies, where when you kill them enough, they stop respawning. I believe the horses will keep respawning forever until you give up or complete the zone. More likely give up. To help you with this, you can summon 2 or 3 NPCs. And those NPCs are basically literally just meat shields for you, because you need something to be able to help you deal with these horses. It's so stupid. It makes no sense why this zone even exists. This is the zone is the epitome of the thing that we were talking about earlier, that it feels like the game expected you to it feels like the game expected you to just rage quit, and they wanted to see people get angry at the game. It's like getting over it or Jump King in Dark Souls. Like, that's what this zone feels like, is just the, you know, oh, I can't wait to see people talk about how mad they got at this zone. But like, why are people playing the game if all they're doing is getting mad? There's also another area that I had forgotten to mention and write down, but it also really sucks, is Dark Lurker. In order to get to Dark Lurker, you have to the Dark Lurker is not a DLC boss. He's in the original game, and there was also, or like in the original game and also in Skull of the First Sin, you have to unlock three separate, you have to talk to this old man at three separate areas, and then as soon as you do, you can give him a humanity, and that will take you into a special zone where you fight a bunch of just normal humanoid enemies that have like a lot of health and do a lot of damage, and also the area itself is really dangerous to go through. You need to kill all of them. You cannot skip any of them. You need to kill all of them, and then light a torch. And then once you light that torch, and kill all of them, then you can leave the area through the exit area, and then that will complete it. And then once you complete 3 of them, leaving the exit area will instead take you to the Dark Lurker. Now, the Dark Lurker itself is one of the hardest bosses in the game, and it is a pretty good boss. Kind of annoying sometimes, but for the most part, definitely one of the best bosses in the game. But if you die during the boss, you don't get a quick run back. You have to go through an entire one of these zones again. And you get, in these zones, you get enemies like Havel, like basically the entire Grave Robber squad, just as normal enemies in there with a lot of health, all attacking you at the same time. Or you get these enemies that spam chain cast fireballs at you that knock you around, as well as like this turtle enemy that just sits there and just smashes you. Or you get this other area that's got some other annoying enemies. Oh yeah, like two separate rangers that are sitting there spam shooting arrows at you. Like, just stuff that doesn't make any sense. Again, a lot of enemies that are damaging your weapon's durability, so that by the time you get to the boss, your weapon is already like half durability. So it's very annoying to have to go through this zone every single time. It ends up being basically what was that?
But it's worth it.
Yeah, apparently. I guess I don't know. Dark Lurker is the closest to being worth it out of any of them, because it is a pretty good fight, but you know,
the closest to fun you can have in the game.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like the run back, if you like do it without taking too much damage, because you want to have some health by the time you get to the boss. It can take like 6 minutes to get back to the boss, and it's like, you know, if there's anything, anyone that like knows me and how I like games, how I like game design and boss design, I hate having a long wind up in order to get to the interesting part of a boss fight. World of Warcraft has done that with Sylvanas as a more recent example. It also did that with N'Zoth back in the previous expansion. A lot of their final bosses, they end up having the interesting part of the fight be 10 minutes into the fight. And it's like, wow, cool. So if you die at the interesting part, well, guess what? You just gotta get, you know, wade through the really tedious, really annoying, but still very possible to die first 10 minutes, and then you get to do the fun part. It's like, why does that need to happen? I don't mind having a first phase that's kind of easy and kind of tedious, and then the second phase that's hard, but I don't like it when that first phase takes 10 minutes. So very, very annoying. So we've talked about it a bit. I want to explain why durability is annoying. Because durability is actually a pretty popular mechanic. Joe and I have both played Breath of the Wild, and durability is a massive thing in that game. Breath of the Wild, I don't mind the durability as much. The main reason being that you don't commit to a weapon, you commit to just having a bunch of weapons. But it's still very annoying when like especially on expert mode or champion or master mode or whatever, like on the final boss you have to pack like 10 weapons because all of them will break by the time you're done. Like that's frustrating. Because it makes you basically just grind stuff. Essentially, the main reason why durability is an annoying, obnoxious mechanic in video games in general, one of the biggest reasons is because it slows down gameplay tremendously, like a huge amount of slowing down. You essentially, when you break a weapon in a game, you're not thinking, oh cool, I just broke my weapon. You're thinking, okay, well now I have to go through my inventory, pull out a different weapon, switch to this other weapon. Oh, this weapon wasn't upgraded. Well, now I'm going to be dealing less damage. Okay, now I'm going to take a bunch of time. Oh, look, now this weapon is almost broken. All right, let's go through my inventory and switch to another weapon. And like, you know, oh, my gear is almost broken. Well, I guess I'll just use this worse gear because my good gear is actually broken. So now when I'm getting into the hard part of the fight, I need to use this crappy gear. That doesn't need to exist, that whole mechanic. And durability was in Dark Souls 1 and is in also Dark Souls 3, and is in all of the From Software Souls-like games. Yeah, I believe it was even in Bloodborne. I don't think it's in Sekiro, but I believe it was in Bloodborne. But in all of those games, it is reined in so much. You don't end up needing to switch weapons mid-boss fight because your weapon broke. You don't end up needing to pack a dummy weapon to use against enemies like the weird like the weird beetle guy that gives you just infinite durability loss. You know, like you end up packing a dummy weapon that you just waste on this guy so that you can kill him, and then you go to your real weapons. Like that's just tedious. That there's no joy in that. That's just a like, okay, well now I need to get all of this extra upgrade material so I can make my dummy weapon at least be able to do damage. And then, you know, maybe I need to pick up a bunch of repair powder just so I can repair my stuff when that ends up happening. And having to go through your inventory to pick up your repair powder, or having to switch to your repair powder, take you out of the action. Just, you know, the boss is sitting there attacking you and you're just slowly walking away like, okay, I need to wait for them to stop their 10 billion hit combo so that I can actually just use this one repair powder and then I can get back into the action. Like, that's not fun. It's really, really not fun. So something else I had mentioned already, I'll just reiterate. Runbacks in Dark Souls 2 are the worst in all of the games. Sometimes taking you 5 to 10 minutes. A lot of times you will fight a boss, you will die to that boss, and you will die about 3 times on the run back before you can even get back to that boss. Meaning you had no chance of getting back those souls, and you had no chance of practicing that boss, because by that point you've already forgotten what you learned from the first time you were going there. And that's one of the most important things, is that one of the reasons why the Dark Souls bosses are so good and why so many people revere them so much is because when you play them and you die to a mechanic, you can learn why you died. You can learn exactly what went wrong. Like, okay, why did that boss kill me? Why did I die when I did that option? Maybe I should try something else. Like fighting against Dark Eater Midir, for example. He starts doing, from Dark Souls 3, he starts doing his like weird tantrum claw attack and he starts breathing fire around. If you try and like run through him, you're gonna end up getting trampled and everything. If you try and run away from him, he's either gonna hit you with his breath or he's gonna hit you when he sweeps his tail around. But you end up getting hit by that attack a bunch and maybe die to it, and you're like, what am I supposed to do? Well, maybe let's try dodging to the left, and you dodge to the left and it works, and you're like, oh hey, that's cool, that worked, I'm gonna do that from now on. If you're fighting Bewitched Knight Alon, you die to him, you know, jumping back and then charging back in with his delayed attack, and then when you're like, okay, I wonder, maybe I should try dodging back when he does that. Well, too bad, you're not going to be able to test that for another 15 minutes because you keep dying while you're on your way back to him, and then finally you do get back to him, but you've forgotten what you were going to test, and so you die to the same thing, and you're like, oh crap, I forgot I was going to test that. And then you have another 15 minutes before you can test it again, and like you keep forgetting, and it's just, there's no reason for a run back to need to have so many enemies along the way. Dark Souls 1 has some pretty rough runbacks too, but all of those runbacks have enemies that you can either very easily kill or very easily get around. I mean, a good example of that is the Moonlight Butterfly, which has a pretty hefty runback and a lot of enemies along the way. But for one, Moonlight Butterfly has, I think, 4 mechanics, and for 2, the enemies along the way to Moonlight Butterfly, most of them have like a super long spawn time, so you can get past them. And and also the ones that are like in front of gateways are not super in front of gateways; they're just kind of in front of gateways. So like, it's just it's very annoying. So I'm gonna kind of speed through some stuff because there are like a few other things that I want to talk about, but I have been going for a while about a lot of the complaints. Some of these other things don't matter as much to me, but like lore-wise, this game is very disconnected. They kind of integrated it in the next game, but you know, it's whatever. Also super long. This game takes a super long time to complete, but not because of like, not a good reason. It's just because it's filled with a bunch of crap, like the stuff we were talking about. ADP, there's no reason for that to exist. ADP is you have to spend souls to level up your iframes to get the amount of iframes you had in the other games. And there are some bosses like Ava, which actually require you to have the soft cap on ADP. Otherwise, you literally cannot dodge a certain attack. It's got so many, it's got lingering hitboxes that prevent you from dodging it unless you have the right amount of iframes, which is very dumb.
It's stuff like that I'm like, yeah, they were just trying to make people rage for no reason.
Yeah, exactly. There's no gameplay design decisions behind that other than just let's make people hate the game. There's other weird things that I'm kind of like about. I like Bonfire Aesthetic. Bonfire Aesthetic is great. It's essentially use it at a bonfire. I mentioned earlier, use it at a bonfire. It levels everything in the following area until the next bonfire up to the next new game cycle, and respawns bosses. So that's kind of cool. The enemies respawning after some amount of kills is a weird thing. I don't know exactly how I feel about that. It's kind of nice, but also kind of frustrating because it means you can't really farm for anything. But you can use the Company of Champions, which just makes everything deal 50% bonus damage and have more damage reduction. But they will no longer stop they'll no longer stop respawning, so that's kind of nice. There's more emphasis on PvP in this game. I don't really care about that because I don't play PvP. There's also soul memory, which is the amount of souls you get adds to your soul memory, and they essentially split PvP up into brackets based off of your soul memory. So unfortunately what that means is if you got a lot of souls but lost a lot of them because you died a bunch, you will be heavily penalized when you're doing PvP compared to someone else who has gotten those souls but actually used them. You'll be like 30 levels lower than them just because you kept losing stuff, which is very likely going to happen based off of these stupid runbacks in this game. But that also like kind of allows you to skip past a certain amount of progression if you farm a bunch of soul memory, which is whatever. But all of this said, there are still some good things about this game. One of them being when you sit at a bonfire, you can just warp to it. You don't have to unlock warping, so that's very nice. That does speed the game up a bit. Repairing happens at a bonfire for free unless the weapon is broken, like completely broken. When you sit at a bonfire, it'll just fully repair your weapon, so you don't need to go to a blacksmith or get a smith box to repair it. There are also some really good bosses in this game. Lost Sinner, who is like in a pretty dark area and like it's just a good sword fight. There's nothing super crazy about it, but it's a good fight. Ruined Sentinels, which is just another pretty good sword fight. Again, kind of annoying having just 3 of the same enemy, but pretty cool. Smelter Demon is great. The attacks the Smelter Demon does are varied and like very cool. Velstad is one of my favorite bosses. He's the one that's got the giant bell on a big hammer, and he places it on the ground and like dings it a bunch of like dong 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 and like shoots like black fireballs at you. It's cool. Dark Lurker is cool because halfway through the fight it splits into 2, and suddenly you're just dealing with this. The mechanics were kind of difficult, but not too much. But all of a sudden now you're having to deal with 2 of them at the same time, and it's one of the only times this game actually does the dealing with 2 at the same time well, because they don't step on each other's toes. They like kind of like give you an opportunity. They don't like both do an unavoidable attack at the same time essentially. So it's like, it is pretty cool. The DLC does have really good, all the DLCs have good bosses. Sin and Alana are great. Sin is a giant dragon. He's one of my favorite dragon fights in the game, in any of the games, other than he also does durability loss, because everything does durability loss in this game, I guess. Alana is a pretty neat fight. Fume Knight is a very cool one. He's one of the best bosses in the game, and also got a lot of cool lore. Burnt Ivory King is a great boss. The Looking Glass Knight is also fantastic. That's the one with, like, he's got the big mirror shield, and he like sticks his sword up in the sky and he gets all lightning, and he spins it around, and he like summons an NPC to fight you during the fight, or if you're online he summons another player, which is a neat idea. Not my favorite thing, but it is still a cool fight. And also Alon is a fantastic fight other than his run back. And there's also some cool bosses that aren't very fun. They aren't very great. They're very half-baked ideas, but the idea is still there. Like the Demon of Song, which is just a giant frog boss that opens up like he opens up his face, like the skin around his face, and like it's a head and like two arms that like reach out to you. It's a super easy boss, but it's really, really unique. Or the Executioner's Chariot, which is a chariot that runs around an arena, and you have to reach the end, pull a lever, a gate comes down, and then it crashes in, and then you fight the horse. Duke's Dear Freya, which is a giant spider boss. You can only attack the head on either side, and it shoots lasers and does stomps and everything. Aldia, it's like this giant tree boss that you can only attack at certain times. Or Vendrick, which you can only really do much damage to him if you have the 5 giant souls, which you get throughout the game, as well as some of the best music in the game. Very, very dramatic. Old Iron King, which is this giant horned demon that comes through the lava, and like he attacks you with his hands and then keeps his hand there, and you gotta attack him there. Mitha, who is like, she's like a Medusa. She like throws her head at you and it like explodes, and then she like picks it up and everything. Like a bunch of cool ideas for bosses. They're just either very easy or pretty boring when you actually play them. And all of the bosses in this game, every single one of them, is placed in a really, really horrible area. Essentially, so this is the phrase this is what I wrote down here. Unfortunately, all of these bosses are stuck in the mire of long, tedious areas, low damage, weird movement, and other frustrating bosses, and some of them have horrible runbacks. And that's basically just like one of the biggest problems with this game, is that the good of the game is so heavily outweighed by the bad. So, bringing this all together, then, what are the lessons in game design? So Dark Souls 2 is a perfect example of missing what Dark Souls 1 was about. The game takes all of the surface level components of Dark Souls 1, like difficulty and the unforgivingness and the boss-centric feel of it and everything, but it doesn't use any of the reasoning as to what actually puts that all together into a really great game, like how it teaches you patience, or how it pays off completing an area or a boss with a very, with satisfaction, like as you have learned a boss or an area. It doesn't make boss fights a special event. You fight bosses all the time in this game, and most of them are just worthless excuses for bosses reused from other sources, either from the game or from other games, or just very, very tedious in general. And it's very, very frustrating and tedious to get through. A lot of the bosses in Dark Souls 2 just feel like a standard enemy with a health bar, or like a mini boss, but they made it a huge deal and turned it into an actual boss. Areas are frustrating to go through, and it just ends up feeling like a big tedious mess to actually work your way through the whole game. And with all of the really, really horrible runbacks, a lot of bosses just don't feel worth going to. It almost feels like the game is punishing you for trying to play, which is, again, like we were talking about earlier, it makes it feel like this is supposed to be a rage game and not an actual game to play. There's also a lot of levels to get. Like, yeah, there's a lot of souls that you get, and you can level up a whole lot more, but they made ADP a thing where you have to get your iframes by leveling. They split up your stamina increases with your carry capacity, so you have to level up carry capacity separately from your stamina. And they also made stamina and health level up at really small intervals, as well as making like things like pyromancy, or like pyromancy requires you to get faith and intelligence in order to actually deal good damage. So it's like a huge, super high soul investment, as well as also requiring other stats like dexterity to cast faster, and of course still, you know, attunement for more slots, and also health and stamina, because now spells cost stamina. Just all this really weird stuff, and it ends up making you just feel nerfed when you get in this game. Even when you get to your highest strength, you just feel nerfed as opposed to feeling more powerful. However, one positive thing I will say, this game does have one of the most enjoyable ways of farming souls, because there's one boss fight that you can get to really easily, and it has a Bonfire Aesthetic in the area right next to him, so you can just constantly respawn him with Bonfire Aesthetic and get a lot of souls. So that's like one positive thing this game did. And again, there are some good bosses in this game. There is some good content in this game. Some of the music is really great. Some of the areas are pretty cool. Not super fun to go through, but pretty cool. The ideas in this game were really great. There is also, like, all 3 DLCs each have their own special crown, which buffs you in some way when you complete the DLC. So that's kind of neat. The giant souls mechanic is kind of neat, like using them for one of the bosses, and some of the bosses just are in general really good. Again, Dark Lurker, Fume Knight, Sin, Smelter Demon, Looking Glass Knight, all of those. Burnt Ivory King is like a big event where you go down to this area and there's a bunch of other soldiers fighting and you kind of help them and join in this war. Like, that's cool. But it's just bogged down with all this other really, really crappy stuff, and ends up just leading to frustration, especially because as someone who really loves Dark Souls 1 and really, really loves Dark Souls 3, when I play through this game, it just feels like a shell of what the entire Souls experience is about. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So
thank you.
So that's kind of as best as I can put into words why I feel like Dark Souls 2 is the most hated of all of the Dark Souls games. And I will say, if you like Dark Souls 2, that is great. Good for you. I'm always very happy whenever people can look past a lot of the negatives to focus on the positives. Because, like, for example, Dark Souls 3 has quite a few negatives, but I really like to focus on the positives. And because of that, I really enjoy that game. To me, the negatives of Dark Souls 2 just way too heavily outweigh the positives, as well as just comparing it to any of the other Souls games. Just it doesn't have the same things that Dark Souls 1 and 3 have. It doesn't have that same reason to play, that same appeal. But some people say that Dark Souls 2 is their favorite one and that they actually don't like the other two like at all. So, if they enjoy it, that's great. If you have fun, if you enjoy running through Horse Relations Valley, then good for you. You're enjoying the worst area in all of Souls. But I just can't look past so much of the negatives of this game, and so because of that, I don't play it very often, not nearly as often as the other ones. And I look at Dark Souls 2 as a game designer, as someone who is getting into game design and making games. I look at Dark Souls 2 as a perfect example of what not to do, how not to make a game, not only just because of the messed up development cycle, but also just because of the actual design choices that they made in the game, with some positive things like the Bonfire Aesthetics as an actual gameplay decision, or some of the boss fights that are cool, making a boss fight a big event like the Ivory King or like Fume Knight or whatever. But for the most part, this game has a lot of big issues. So, Joe, do you want to play Dark Souls 2 now?
I think I'll start with the first one. And if I ever finish that, I will give Dark Souls 2 a try.
Yeah, Dark Souls 2 is one of those games. I think it's kind of fun it's cool to play through your first time. I think it's like a worthwhile game to play through once. I don't think it's a very fun one to play more than once, though. I think it's one of those games that you play through it once for the experience and just to say that you have played through Dark Souls 2, but then you stick to Dark Souls 1 and 3 primarily, or Bloodborne. I've never played Bloodborne. Someday I want to, but I know a lot of people say that's one of the best of the Souls games. So, and then of course Elden Ring is coming out in less than a month, so hopefully that will be more like Dark Souls 1 and 3 and Bloodborne, and less like Dark Souls 2. We'll see.
They're releasing a game for the Dark Souls 2 fans.
Yes, like Dark Souls 2 fans, we heard all three of you, and we
We spent millions of dollars on a game that was just like this.
yes. Uh. So yeah, so that's Dark Souls 2. Those are some of the reasons why Dark Souls 2 is looked down on very heavily in the Souls community. Again, I did talk about some of the positive things because there are some positive things in this game. So if you've never played it and you like Dark Souls 1 and 3, or even just Dark Souls 1, I would suggest that you check it out. Keep an open mind, know that there are some annoying things and you will be annoyed while you're playing through it, but there are still some positives. So experience it once and then, think to yourself, if you do enjoy it, if you really, really have fun, then great, go ahead. My first time playing through Dark Souls 2, I genuinely thought it had a chance of beating Dark Souls 1 for my list of favorite games. And then by the second and third time I played through it, I was like, ooh, no, never mind.
Aged like milk.
Yeah, it really, really aged like already month-old milk.
I just had a thought though. You said that the game had some positives, and I just thought that I don't think any game that has no positive whatsoever would be worth talking about for an hour and 40 minutes, because
That's
there
true.
wouldn't be any potential for having made it you only talk about bad games that had potential. You don't talk about oh, this game was literally nobody bought it because it was so bad.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's a very important thing to keep in mind with any of these, even with something that is mostly negative, like me talking about Dark Souls 2 and talking about why people dislike it. That's not me saying that it's a terrible game and that it's, because if it was a terrible game, like Joe said, it wouldn't be worth talking about, because there is some good to be gained out of this, whether it's lessons on what not to do, or if it's lessons on what to do, or if it's this was a really cool moment. These were really interesting mechanics. They're worth talking about. Because obviously if there was nothing good, then this game would be so bad that no one would talk about it, because it would just be yeah, obviously people hate Dark Souls 2. It just doesn't have anything good. But no, there is some good stuff in this game. And for a lot of people that might play it only once or twice, they might not realize what some of those negative things are. They might not see why people do have that negative view of this game. So, but again, like Joe said, no game that is wholly terrible is worth talking about. So this game is not wholly terrible. This game is just this game is a pretty good game, but not a very good Souls game. But again, lots of good lessons to be gotten from this, especially the whole basic idea of paying more attention to why a game is successful. Why was Dark Souls 1 successful? It wasn't because the game was a super difficult game, especially because by the time Dark Souls 1 came out, it wasn't that popular to be posting, YouTube videos oh, I'm getting so angry at dying to the first enemy in the game over and over again. Rage. At that point, that wasn't the most popular thing. That kind of happened as the game kept growing older and everything. But someone might play Dark Souls 1 and be like, wow, this game is really difficult, so therefore Dark Souls is supposed to be a game that is really difficult. And it's that's a part of what it is. It is difficult, but that's because it has that payoff, that reward at the end of you work really hard and then you get this success and that dopamine hit, because you're like, wow, I just successfully completed this boss. That's great. I worked really hard on this thing. This thing took me 10 tries, but I finally did it. So,
Don't you feel really rewarded fighting that weird ass beetle guy who destroys your armor?
yeah, very rewarded every time. Yeah, that's one of those enemies that because there is a bonfire near him, so it almost feels worth it to kill him, sit at the bonfire, kill him, just keep doing that until you get him to stop respawning by that mechanic, and then you can actually play the game normally. Just pack 10 different weapons and just use them until they break on him, and then pull out the new weapon and keep doing that until he eventually stops respawning, and they're like, okay, Now I can actually play through the area. So, anyways,
I enjoyed your TED Talk today.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I was trying to think of what I wanted to make the next topic for my episode, and I was going to do Slay the Spire. I will do it at some point because that game really deserves a good talk about, but I couldn't. I didn't have everything prepared like I wanted to for that, because I want to give it like a really solid, really good talk. But Dark Souls 2, I've already known a lot of the stuff I want to say about this game for a long while, so I was ready to talk about this pretty quick. And you know, I hope I did it justice. You know, Dark Souls 2 fans, anyone out there, I'm really sorry if you disliked hearing me rag on your favorite game or a game that you really like. You are more than welcome to enjoy this game. I am more than welcome to very much not enjoy it. So, you know, in the famous words of Markiplier, you do you, I'll do me, and we won't do each other, probably.
Probably.
That's a
I
good
mean, I
poem.
would say I would say I haven't played the game, but none of what you said seemed unfair. I just think if someone likes the game, they'd be like, yeah, that's fair. All of those things are probably true, but it doesn't matter to me. I still enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's like it's if you really enjoy like most of the game, then it is pretty easy to look past the negatives. And in something like this, that's like, this is, you know, like for every one of our games, there are those negatives, and so it's nice to when you enjoy the positives enough that you're willing to look past some of those negatives, and you're willing to live with them, I should say, not even look past, but you know, the negative. I tried to be as fair as possible and be as honest as possible. So I appreciate, Joe, that you felt that I did a good job of being honest. I hope anyone watching this feels the same way. But yeah. But if you do like Dark Souls 2 and you've never played 1 or 3, or 3, play them both. They're both great. I love Dark Souls 3 a lot. A lot of other people swear by Dark Souls 1, and I think it's a pretty good game, but not my favorite. But play them. They're great.
Dude.
All right. Well, that is the end of this episode.
All right, and if you enjoyed that, come back next time. If nothing else comes up, I plan on talking about Bioshock Infinite.
Ooh, nice.
You could probably tell I enjoy myself a single-player RPG every once in a while. So there's another one of those.
Nice. Yeah, I enjoy good single-player RPGs too, so I'm excited for that one, because I know Bioshock Infinite is one of those ones that like a lot of people talk, like a lot of Bioshock fans say it wasn't a very good one, but like I also hear some people saying it was really great, and I know you've talked about it a lot to me, that like you thought it was a really fun one. So
Well, I might be biased because I didn't play Bioshock 1 before I played Infinite, so I had nothing to go off of, and it was a good game in my opinion.
Yeah.
Probably not a game that people expected out of the Bioshock series, but a good game nonetheless.
Nice. Looking forward to that.
Well,
right. Well, thank you, Joe, for joining.
Thank you for having me, as always.
Yeah. 'Twas a fun time.
I will leave you to it if you're planning on doing anything else.
Yeah, I'm probably going to do a little bit of Slay the Spire, I think, to end the stream off.
That was enjoyable on my end.
Good.
See you guys next week, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you guys very much for watching and listening to us. So yeah, like Joe said, we'll be back next week with the next episode of the podcast. So tune in then for another wacky zany episode.
And until then, this has been definitely a podcast.
That's right. It definitely was a podcast.